Hey Brynn, how you doing today? You ready to talk about marketing lists?
I have never been more ready.
Okay, that's good to know. So today, thank you for joining me, and to all of you out there, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more of these things. We're going to talk about marketing lists inside of the Dynamics 365 sales module. So there is another module, the full marketing module called Dynamics 365 Customer Insights. Is that right, Brynn?
Customer insights journeys. But
Customer
yes,
Insights Journeys. I forgot the important journeys part.
yes, very important.
So today, though, we're going to talk about marketing lists inside of the basic Dynamics 365 sales product, and then we'll do another video soon talking about how that works inside of the full marketing module, the customer insights journey module. Sound good, Bryn? Did I confuse everybody?
I hope not, but yes,
Okay,
I hope not. These marketing lists that we're going to be looking at today are standard with D365 sales, so you don't need anything beyond it to use these here.
perfect. And the for those of you who don't do much in the way of marketing, this is essentially a way to segment your data. I like to say slice and dice your data and to get different groupings, lists of people that meet different criteria, such as my top 20 customers by sales or everyone in the Midwest, things like that. So you can create segmented lists and then you can do different activities. So Bryn's going to talk a little bit about what these lists look like, how to build the lists, what the different options are, and then how to do the activities against the list. So, Brynn, to start with, we're looking at a list right now, right?
Yes, we are. We are looking at a list right now of our current Microsoft customers, which gets a little cut off here. But if I hover over it, you can see the full name.
Perfect. And if you just want to just go without me asking the dumb questions that I like to ask, because if you want to just walk down those options there on the left-hand side, that'd be great.
Yes. So we're inside of our marketing list. You can see this is for our current Microsoft customers, as we said earlier. This is a dynamic list. So there are, and feel free to interrupt anytime with questions, but there are two different types of lists when it comes to marketing lists in D365. The first is a dynamic list, which is what we're looking at here. And the reason that it's called dynamic is because it's actually built using a query that is dynamically running all the time in the back end of the system to search criteria that we've given it with that query to return the folks that are in that list. So this is actually pulling from, we have a field in our system called the product, basically the product line. So if our contact, or if our contact or account that we have in the system has Microsoft Dynamics as their product, it's going to pull them into that list using that query. So anytime that we have a new customer who is using Microsoft, they're going to be added to this list. Every time that we, hopefully never, but if we lose a customer, we lose a contact, they're no longer using Dynamics, they'll be removed from this list dynamically. We don't have to make any manual changes to it at all.
Brynn, we never lose customers, do we?
Never, no. But if we
Okay.
did, in the event
Oh,
that we did,
theoretically. Okay, gotcha.
theoretically, yes, this list would update to remove that individual's name from this marketing list, so that if we're sending out communications, if we're doing any outreach, we're not reaching out to somebody who no longer fits the criteria of our marketing list.
It seems to me like that'd be really useful. And the other type of list is a static list. Why would I use a dynamic list? Or maybe explain what a static list is in contrast, and then explain why I would use dynamic versus static or static versus dynamic.
Yeah, really great question. So, a static list is exactly how it sounds. It stays the same. So, it is a manually created list that I would build. I could build it using a query, or I could just manually add different contacts, different accounts to the list. But it's going to stay the exact same as it is unless there's a manual intervention to add anyone or to remove anyone from the list. So a good example of a static list, one that gets used a lot, is let's say that you're having like an event invite. I'm not going to run a query necessarily to like return a list of the people that I want to invite to my holiday party. I'm probably going to look through my results and say, I'd like to invite these 10 customers or these 10 contacts to my party. And I can add or remove people from that list at any time. There's nothing that's going to change it without me manually going in and adding or removing some folks to it.
Static list of all the people you didn't invite to let them know
Yeah.
that they weren't invited, to really like
Yes.
rub the salt in the wound.
I can run a dynamic list actually for that and just pull everyone who's not related to this
Oh,
first static list and just say, sorry, losers, no one is, you're not
oh,
invited this year
that's so
to the
sad.
party. Yeah.
Well, I hope I get on that list this year. So anyway,
You will, yeah, you will be now. So,
thank you.
yeah, of course. But you can use them for a lot of different reasons. You could say your top 10 customers. So maybe I want to create a list of my top 10 customers that's not necessarily based on my data. My first 5 customers, whatever it is, I can create it. And again, I can create that stat. We'll walk through actually creating these lists in a bit, but you can use a query to create them or manually just select who is added and who is not.
Perfect.
Did that answer your question?
It sounds good to me. Let's keep moving.
Perfect.
This looks good.
So for our list purpose, this is just a text field. So I chose it's, product updates. I want to use this marketing list to send out new information, new news about what's going on with Microsoft. Obviously, if we have a customer on a different platform like Sage or something like that, they're probably not going to be interested in Microsoft updates. So this list is targeted specifically at those customers to give them, product information and updates that are going to be pertaining to them.
And I think that's an important thing to note. Like, if the people that are watching this video probably are in marketing, so they probably already know this, but the more specific you can make your list, the more specific you can have your messages be. And the more specific your messages are, the more likelihood that someone's going to click through, read that message, engage with that message, and have the desired behavior that you want. So it's really great to use these lists in Microsoft's Dynamics to create very targeted, specific, niche-y lists.
Yes, very true. And I think even on top of that, this is maybe not the best example, but I'll say for future, this is an optional field, right? So I didn't actually have to put any data in here. I, however, will always suggest if there is a field that you can enter data into, do it as much as possible. Also, making sure that your naming conventions are really tight, because you will have over time, hopefully, right? You've probably got tens or hundreds of different marketing lists that you want to organize. Making sure that you have good naming conventions in place is really useful for, I'm just me creating this list for myself, my own use. But if I have a team of 3, 5, 10 other members that are all interacting with the same marketing lists, we want to make sure that everything's really easy to find. We know what the purpose is, we know what kind of campaigns it's been used for, and where to find it. So naming conventions are always really important as well. It's a really good point, Peter.
Since you raised the topic, can anybody create these lists, or do you have to give people permissions? Like, is it a default behavior that any salesperson can create their own lists?
Yes, so you are able to create marketing lists. You will have to add it to your sitemap if it's not already available. So it's not, if you're using like a custom app, for instance, in our On-Track Sales Hub, it's not natively there, so it'll have to be added in. But you are able to create lists by default. The one little tweak that I'll mention down here at the bottom is that when you're creating a list, you can also choose if you would like it to be editable by other parties or not. So if I create lists that are just for me, I don't want anybody else, any other team members to be able to edit them, I can lock this list down. If you want to leave it open for changes, anybody else on the team has access to it. So there is a little bit of security there as well.
That's pretty cool. And if I didn't want certain people creating lists, I could probably just not add it to the sitemap. And for the non-technical people that are listening, the sitemap is just the menu, basically.
Yeah,
so
right over here.
Yeah, you can just add it to the menu or not.
Yes, so it's either on the menu or not. You also can control the ability to create a marketing list as well. So if I say like, I only want sales managers, or I only want management team members to be able to create a marketing list, you absolutely can use just general system security settings to lock down who is able to create, interact with, view, utilize lists and campaign actions as well. So you do have control over that.
Awesome. All right. Moving on, what is targeted at? What are my options there, and why would I pick contact versus whatever the other options are?
Great question. So you can target either a contact or an account. It's just basically like giving you the option to pull in who are we messaging this to. You can see, or maybe you can't see, but on the account record, there is a space for an email address. So if I'm doing a targeted email campaign and I want to reach out to all of my accounts, if I select account here, targeted at account, it's going to pull that email address. So that's probably, in our situation at least, like an info@azamba.com or similar. So that's the email address that's going to be targeting. Most of the time, oh yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Oh, I was just going to say, just to paraphrase it in the way I think about things, it'd be basically, if I'm targeting accounts, it's going to give me the email for the primary person at that account, versus if I target all contacts, I could get a list of 10 different people at ABC Corporation or 10 different people at XYZ Corporation. So I'm going to basically saturate all of them with an email or a phone call or whatever the activity is that I'm going to do.
Exactly. So you're not even necessarily just looking for that first individual, who's my primary contact, key decision maker. If you have 10 different folks working at ABC company, we want to reach out to all 10. Or if you want to filter, which of those 10 we want to be reaching out to if it's not that main identified primary contact person, you'll usually be targeting this contact table most of the time.
Perfect. Yeah. And to your point about filtering, I would assume like you could use like their job titles. Like you could say, just give me all the vice presidents or everybody in charge of ordering or procurement.
Yes, exactly. And it's going to depend on your data set. So the kind of data that you're collecting on your contacts or at your account level. You also, incidentally, just because I'm selecting contact here doesn't mean that I can't utilize account data to create my filter. So I'm still able to access those related tables. So if I wanted to say all of my contacts who work for an account that is in construction, I still have access to that account data. What kind of account is it? How is the contact related? You can still pull that in and use that to the filter. It doesn't have to be data that just lives on the contact record, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's really cool. I'm wondering if maybe we should have a separate video altogether on how to do these queries, because it sounds like there's a lot of different options. So instead of trying to squeeze it in today, we can save that for a future video.
Yeah, there's a ton that you can do here, and even more when we start talking about customer insights and segmenting that out. So definitely a lot of flexibility with how you build these queries, how they're refreshed, and how you use the lists. So a lot of information there to get through.
So the source, is that just also a text field that you just say where the data is coming from? Like if you buy leads from a lead source, or if you're pulling data in from an external data engine?
Yes, so a lot of people also will use these, like the source field for instance, if you were at a conference, or if you, like you said, if you purchased a lead list, where did I get this information from? That's another optional field, so it'll apply to some people more than others, but it is nice to, again, like I said, if you can fill in some data here, it's usually good to do so, just for our ability to kind of query these lists later when we have a larger amount of them.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Why is the currency on here? What purpose does that serve?
So that would be in the situation that you mentioned of like if I purchased this list, if I purchased a list of leads, for instance, if I purchased any information, I can add a cost here to keep track of that. So I also can attach this cost to, and we'll talk about this a little bit later when we look at like campaigns and quick campaigns. But if I'm assigning a dollar amount to maybe like a reach out campaign, a quick campaign, a drip campaign, you can keep track of all of your different costs so that you know what you're actually spending on these campaigns from the bottom up.
And then I would guess at some point too, you could probably run an analysis either with built-in reporting or with Power BI to say, here's how much money came from these prospects that we purchased on this list, and you can figure out which lead sources are your most beneficial.
Yeah, so you can use it to calculate your ROI pretty easily. As long as the data exists in the system, you can report on it. So if you choose to report on that in Power BI, through a dashboard, by creating a report, I mean, you've got a lot of different options.
Awesome. Cool.
So our next field up, you can see last use on is blank for the moment, but essentially what we'll fill in there in this calendar view is that if we use this list to create either a quick campaign, we'll talk through the difference between those in a bit, it's going to automatically update this last used on date. So that is also helpful for marketing lists when you are working with like a bigger team. It's nice to know if I did have, let's say maybe if I weren't great at naming conventions and I had 3 different lists going that all say current Microsoft customers, I'd be able to filter by, show me all of my lists that have been used in the last 3 months or the last year. That's going to help me further break that data down as well.
Awesome.
And
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say the next one is pretty easy. We discussed this earlier. So if it's locked or if it's open, this one is open, so it is editable to anybody.
Then you have the owner, which is whoever owns the list, built the list, and then a description, which is kind of like probably a more extended version of the purpose.
Yes, exactly. And it's as you mentioned, like this is just a kind of quick short text field, so I could give a pretty quick and easy purpose there. My description for this one is pretty simple, but I could give it a longer form as well. That's a good spot to kind of identify what the list is going to be used for as well.
I liked your comment before about people should like set naming conventions or at least think a
Yeah.
little bit ahead, because I see too many people making lists and they'll just make them on the fly without good descriptions, without good purposes, and then they'll just have a list of like 40 different lists, and it's impossible to tell why you built that list. So it is good to go into it with a little bit of planning and foresight and try to be as descriptive as possible.
Yeah, I agree with that. Naming conventions are also really useful too. As you mentioned, let's say I build a list of our current Microsoft customers, and then Carly from our team wants to target our current Microsoft customers, but can't find or isn't aware of my list, and she creates her own.
Ooh.
Unfortunately, we're losing some information there because, as you can see, I've got this, last used on. I can see all of the different campaigns, all of the different quick campaigns. I can see all of the communications that have gone out to people on this list. If Carly is creating a separate list herself, I'm not seeing the full history of the communications between the folks on this list and us. So it's really nice to have those naming conventions in order, and then also to have a best practice around how do we use these lists internally so that Carly knows I should go and check and see if this list exists first, and then utilize that list so that we have all of our data in one place. We don't have to kind of go hunting down that information in different places later to report on it for any reason.
I think what you just described there is exactly why I was asked about security earlier, because I could see most companies as a best practice probably want to have one or two key people who kind of own making the lists, even though all the sales reps might want to use a list, because otherwise it's going to be the Wild West. You're going to get a lot of redundancy, and there's that old saying, garbage in, garbage out. And if you don't control your data, it's going to be really hard to report and analyze on it and see what's working and what's not.
Yeah, very true. And it's nice that we have that first step of, does the list exist? I do like the idea of kind of locking it down so at least a few key people, especially when you're just initially rolling something out like this, because you're going to want to have people who go in and test and create kind of that junk data. So also kind of doing some general housekeeping or having a best practice around like how maybe every 3 months, every 6 months, we kind of do an inventory of the lists that exist in the system, the ones that are active and usable, or do we want to deactivate a couple if we're not using them as frequently, so that you kind of have a clean ship basically of the data that you're looking at and working with, as opposed to just every list we've ever created for any reason, test and reel in the system can get a little bit overwhelming.
I like the way you say that. Like, a lot of our clients are manufacturing and distribution clients. They have warehouses, and you will periodically do a physical inventory where you go and check and make sure everything's where it's supposed to be and you have the right counts. And people should think that way with their data as well, and just do kind of a regular data quality kind of cleanup process and work that into their system. I mean, it's one thing if you only have 2 or 3 lists and you just aren't growing those lists, but if you do have a lot of very niche specific lists that you build, it's probably a good idea to keep on top of those.
Yeah, I'll say especially when it comes to static lists. Because dynamic, usually like this current Microsoft customers query that I'm running, it's always updating in the back end. So this list is always going to contain an accurate representation of who is a current Microsoft customer. If I create like a static list though, and maybe it's like my top 10 favorite customers, that could change from month to month, minute to minute, day to day. And that list might be outdated a lot quicker than something like my dynamic list here. So you want to kind of keep an eye on the data that you have in the system, especially if you're creating a list to be used by other people. Because Carly, again, for example, if she comes in and wants to contact my list of my 10 favorite customers and doesn't know that that hasn't been updated for a couple of years now, that list is not going to be useful to her at all. So it's generally good practice to kind of keep an eye on your data, what's in it, what's active, what's inactive, just so that you have a little bit more control over really everything in the system. And so it gets less frustrating and overwhelming for other people in the system as well.
The only thing I'm confused about is you keep saying 10 favorite customers. I thought you told me that all your customers are your favorites.
There are about 10. Yeah, I'd
Oh my
say
goodness.
I have a hierarchical system of favorites. So everyone is my favorite, and then there are 10 to 15 favorites. Yeah,
Oh, that makes
exactly.
sense. It's kind of like the priority system. Everything's a high priority, but some things are ultra high.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's my favorite, and then you do have a couple favorites that I will not share the static list of today, but maybe another time.
Perfect. So I'm looking across this list. I'm not sure where you were going to go next, but I'm kind of
Sure.
curious about the members. So that's the list of actual people, whether it's dynamic or static. This is the list of people that would actually be in this list. So any activities I do.
Absolutely. So you can check, and this list again is being populated right now by a dynamic query. So if I came in here tomorrow, this list might look different, but it's going to show you all of the contacts because I'm targeting the contact table. It's going to show me all of my contacts that are currently members of this list. So if I were to take an action against this list, send an email, create a task, any of those kind of things, set up a phone call for the future, it's going to be against these individual contact records. So Kevin, Wes, Peter.
This might be a real simple question to
Yeah.
answer. The columns at the top here, could I change that? Like, let's say I want to see their business title too. Is that easy enough to add, or is that difficult?
Yes, you can. So you'll want to edit the form, and I think we have some videos on this as well that maybe
Oh,
we could link to. But you want to edit this actual marketing list form that is here, and then this is just the members view. You can edit that right in the back end. Unfortunately, you see you don't have the option to kind of add columns here. It's just the form view. But if you do have system administrator or system customizer access to the back end, it's pretty easy to add a couple of different fields in here so that you have some different information to sort by. But yeah, you absolutely can.
very cool. Okay, so do you want to just dive into like what do I do with this data? So I've got this list of
Yeah.
people. Can we run a campaign? Can we and like for me, I noticed there's campaigns and there's quick campaigns. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, I'm gonna play dumb here and say, why
Sure.
would I use what is a quick campaign? Why would I use that instead of a full campaign?
Yeah, so great question. They're very similar in terms of the activities that you're allowed to do. A quick campaign is something that's just a quick one off. So if I wanted to send out an email blast at one time, if I wanted to create like a follow up activity for maybe not necessarily this list, but if I had new customers in the last month, I could create like a quick follow-up activity just to see how everybody's doing, a little quick check-in. I could create a task against everybody on this list. So it's just kind of a one-off, one thing that we're doing right now that's just very quick. A campaign, on the other hand, could be a series of different activities. So it could be anything from maybe it's an email and a follow up task to an extensive summer drip campaign or year long drip campaign. So you could add as many kind of different activities in there, checkpoints in there as you like, versus a quick campaign that's just going to be kind of a doing this today quickly and I just want to get this email out or get this task created in the system.
If I could rephrase that in my own words, let me know if I got
Sure.
this right or wrong.
Go.
But a quick campaign is almost like just a one-off activity. It's like I want
Yeah.
to, Microsoft releases a really important update, and I want to let everyone know like right away. So I would do a one-off activity, whether it's an email or maybe it's a phone call campaign or whatever it is. I just want to do that one-off thing. But a campaign is more like on a monthly basis, we let customers know about what new cool things that Microsoft is doing with Dynamics and Power Apps.
Yes, very true. Good synopsis. I think the other thing about campaigns and quick campaigns is that we can be really used to thinking about them in terms of email marketing, right? Because that's
Yeah.
typically what we're thinking about. We're thinking about marketing lists. However, it's also kind of a sub benefit or another benefit of using marketing lists is you can use them to create bulk tasks. So I could create again like a dynamic marketing list of all my customers that are onboarding in the last 30 days or maybe they just finished their onboard. And I want to create a bulk task for my concierges to kind of go through and reach out to everybody and have just like a kind of general check-in instead of going and kind of filtering through my data on the CRM side, selecting each customer that I have and then adding a manual task for each one. So let's say there's 10, creating 10 different manual tasks. I can use this marketing list to come in here, quickly create just one task that's going to be sent to everyone that fits that criteria. And it's going to show up on the to-do list of my concierges to follow up with those tasks. So it's not only just for email marketing. I think that's like obviously the main benefit that people typically see when you're thinking about marketing lists. But you also can use it even just for general task creation for your sales team or for your support team to kind of bulk create those tasks that otherwise would be a manual process of individually creating a task 10, 15, 20 times.
I think it's really interesting. I'm going to paraphrase this one too, because a lot of
Sure.
prospects come to me and there's this sometimes there's this perception that CRM is just for getting new business,
Mm-hmm.
but the truth is most of our customers, 85% of their business is from account management and working with
Yeah.
existing customers, right? And so like this is a great tool for account management. So like you could say, we're going to launch a new product. And so we want to do an email blast for sure. And that might be a quick campaign, a one-off activity, an email
Yeah.
blast to all these people. But then I want all my account managers to follow up after the email goes off. And so I'll send these 10 things to Brynn to do, these 10 things for Peter to do, these 10 things for Carly. And so like you'll just do that right here. And that way you can have really disciplined account management and you can help ensure that your people are supporting the corporate initiatives like a new product launch.
Yeah, exactly. It's very useful. And then the other nice thing about marketing lists is that we have a history of all of that now saved in this marketing list. I can see all of those bulk tasks that I've created, those email campaigns that have gone out to everybody. So I know I have that entire history right for myself inside this marketing list. I don't have to kind of go into the individual records and hunt around for what's been done, what's been created. I can come right here and have kind of a one-stop shop for everybody on that list.
Can you clarify something for me that you just
Yeah,
said? So
sure.
let's say I create a task that says to all, and I assign it to all my account managers, follow up about our new product launch with
Mm-hmm.
all of your individual customers. So I'll be able to go in here and pull up that task and see that Peter did his 10 calls, Brynn did her 10, but Carly still's only got 5 out of 5 done. Like I'll be able to see that from here.
Let's actually walk through. I think that's a really good example. Do you want to walk through
Okay.
just creating it and we see?
Yeah, let's just call it a new product launch. New product launch follow up for, the account managers.
And I'm going to do a quick, I skipped a step here, but I'm going to do a quick campaign because this is just a single step that I want to create for one time in the
Yep.
system. It's going to pop up a wizard for me first. It's just going to ask me to give campaign details. That's pretty simple. So I'm going to say next here. What is the name of my quick campaign? I'm going to say follow-up task
Yeah, for the new product launch.
for the new product launch.
Perfect.
And I'm going to say June, July of 24. You got it. Okay. So I'm going to go next. And what type of activity is it that I want to create? So I am able to create an appointment. So this is an actual Outlook appointment that would go out to everybody. So only select that option if you want to send out a bunch of appointments.
Wow, that sounds dangerous.
So skip that one most often, unless you're really sure about the folks on this list. An email, which is going to get used pretty frequently. Fax, hit or miss.
Is it the 90s?
Yeah, you can create a fax, a letter, or a phone call. So for a follow-up appointment, I'm probably just going to go ahead and create this as a phone call task. Yep. And then I can choose to assign it to. So I could assign it to myself. So I could say the owner, whoever's creating this task, is going to get all of these different records assigned to them. I could also assign to another specific user. So I could put like my sales team in here. I could put Peter in here and have you follow up on all these tasks. Or I could say whoever is the owner of the record, which is probably what I want to do in this case, is whoever's my account manager, whoever is, currently owning or working with this contact record, I want that person to be able to reach out to the folks on this list.
Before you move on, I have a question
Yeah.
about something you just mentioned. When you said assign it to other user or team, so like
Yeah.
if you assign it to the sales team, and let's say you and I and Carly are on the sales team, would all three of us get that task showing up in our activities?
So that's a great question. It's almost a trick question. So yes and no. In your views where you see the words my, so anytime that you see in the system, my accounts, my contacts, my activities, those are going to be targeted at your specific user. However, you do have the option to, if you're on a team, so like Peter is on the sales team or Peter's on the customer service team, you can modify those initial views or create new views that are going to pull in not just the records that are owned by you, but you or any team that you are a part of. So you could have a separate view for the sale. And we could do another entire call on just this concept in general, which we probably should. But if you're part of the sales team and you also want to see all of the records that are owned by the sales team, a lot of times people will do like leads. So a lead might not necessarily be assigned to me, Brynn, but it might be assigned to the sales team generally, so that anybody who's on that team can kind of pick up that lead, work that record. But there's a lot of different use cases for that we could talk through as well. But yes, you absolutely could assign to a team of users, an individual user.
Cool.
There's a lot of flexibility around that as well.
Yeah, I think we should go back and cover that at some other date. But for
Yeah.
now, thank you for answering the question, because that explains it well enough for me. For now, we do want to assign it to the account manager, so we'll do that
Yes.
top option.
All right, top option. I'm going to go ahead and say next. And then this is where I'm actually filling in my details for this follow-up activity. So I can give it a due date. So I'm going to say it's a holiday weekend. So I'm going to go maybe a little bit out. I'll say next Friday. By next Friday, let's say 11
It's interesting.
a.m.
That looks like it's an optional field. It doesn't have the red asterisk. If you don't assign a due date, it just means your people will just do it when they get to it.
Generally, yes. So
Yeah.
I am always a fan of using a due date because a lot of times when people have their views created, you'll have it arranged by due date. So a lot of people will say, like, show me everything that's due soonest at the top of the list. If you don't have a date in there, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle a bit. So if you can use a date, even if it's just kind of to plug something in, it's generally good to have something like that. Also, again, anytime that there's a field that we can have data in it, usually pretty good to have, so you don't get used to just seeing kind of blank fields throughout the system. But yes,
Makes
you
sense.
absolutely, is not required, but highly recommended to use a due date here.
And the subject, I assume, is just what's going to show up on each individual salesperson's calendar.
Yes. New
or their
product
task
launch.
list.
Launch, email. Let's
This is
assume
gonna
that we
be a
sent the email earlier.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go right ahead.
I was just going to ask, this might be a trick question. The answer might be no, but can you make that dynamic? Like, could you say, like, percent contact name follow up on new product launch, or is that not possible?
Currently, it's not possible in the D365 sales version of Marketing List that we're looking at today. It is something that you can do in the full customer insights journeys. So that's
Oh, well, I can't wait for that video.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see that. That sounds like what I want.
Well, here we go. But so much to say on that. No. So unfortunately, you're not able to kind of personalize here. I can't put the account name in the actual like subject or description here. But you will have that information on the task. So if I wanted to, you're able to see that at the task level, at the phone call level. It just won't specifically be here in the subject or in the description, but it will be related to the account or contact.
Makes sense. So this is where you put in like notes, because when they,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people don't understand how important this is. In my opinion, this is really important, because what you want to do is put a good enough description that whoever the account manager is or the salesperson that gets this activity, when they open up the activity, it tells them exactly what to do. Tell them about the features, ask if they want to see the URL, or see if it's okay to email them the brochure. Like, just spell out what they want to do, because that way it's going to make it easier for them to have a fruitful conversation.
Yes. So I gave just a general little description. You can put as much, I again also like lean towards putting as much information in this description as possible, especially if you selected to assign these tasks to other people. If I was assigning it to myself, I've probably got a good idea or a decent idea of what I want this task to be about. But if I'm assigning it anytime to other users, you want to be as like specific as possible. And honestly, even when I'm assigning tasks to myself, I might know right now in this minute, follow up on new product launch email, what that means to a T, but it's a long weekend. Maybe I come back on Monday, maybe a week or a couple days go by, and I have done an awful lot of things since I created this task. So anytime that you can fill in as much description as possible, always a benefit for future you to kind of look back on this and remember what it is and what the purpose was, especially.
Yeah, and if you're doing, like, we're talking about 10 calls each, that's nothing. But like, if you
Yeah.
have people calling hundreds of people, like, they're not going to sit down and do them one after another. Usually they're going to have other
Yeah.
things that they're doing in their day, so there's going to be breaks in their day. They're going to put it down and come back to it. It never hurts to be more descriptive.
Yeah, exactly. I also have the duration option here. This is just like when I create a phone call anywhere else in the system. So do I think this task is going to take 45 minutes, 15 minutes, a minute? I'm going to set this at 15 just for now. That's typically a good amount of time to prep for a phone call, have the phone call, and enter my follow-up information for the phone call. But this is customizable as well if you wanted to have some different options for duration in here. So I'll go ahead and
so
say,
this is pretty straightforward.
yeah, really straightforward when it comes to the wizard. It's just going to ask you those leading questions. It's going to give you an option to review what you created. So what is the name, activity, what's the scope, who is getting the actual task assigned. So I could go back and edit if any of this looked inaccurate, or I can hit create right now and it's going to actually create all of these phone call activities for us. Yeah, let's
Be
go
brave.
for it. Yeah, I'm not Didn't even, I barely checked it, but okay, cool. You can see I've got a quick campaign here for my phone call task. I can see my total members, my number of successes or failures. And okay, it's
So the
pending. Let me
successes and
refresh.
failures, so those would be tracked like as Brynn and Peter and Carly make their calls, it will count them as completed.
Oh, I've just double clicked to open this record. So it will actually show me the number of successes, like for the actual tasks created or not created, but I have not seen anything come through yet. I think we have a decent amount of numbers on this list, so it might take a minute just to run.
Yeah, it's going to take a minute. Well, while
Mm-hmm.
that's working, so I have a question. How does it define what does success mean?
Success is
Like, because all we're
just,
doing here is putting tasks on people's calendars.
yes, and that's it. So if there were any failures, as in like it could not create the task, you can see it has refreshed now. So I have 0 failures, which is good. But success is, it's not asking you how many have been completed.
I
it's just
see.
telling you how many have been created. So we
It's
have
created
22
the
members. Yes. Yeah. You want
perfect.
these numbers to match. So like this 22 members, we've got 22 folks on this list. So we've got 22 different members, and then we want this number to match exactly. So it's actually created 22 different tasks, one for each individual contact that is a part of this marketing list. If there were any failures, you could open this record up and investigate why it failed. And that is typically going to be for something like an email. It's not as useful here in our context of creating a task because we're just creating a task in the system. If this had been, say, like an email blast, though, and maybe we have an incorrect email. So instead of it saying like at abccompany.com, it says abccompany.can. That email is going to bounce, right? And it's not going to be counted as a success because the email was not delivered. It'll give me the information here that it failed, and I can open the record and investigate further why did it fail so that I could send it again, basically. Does that make
Will
more
it
sense?
automatically? Oh yeah. Will it automatically? If you did an email activity there, would it automatically check and see if they're flagged with do not email and not send an email? So if I had 22 names, but 3 of them were do not email me, would it prevent that? Or would you have to put that in your query?
I believe, let's see, we can walk through it maybe in another video. I know in the customer insights journeys, it absolutely does check. I believe that it checks as far as the quick campaign goes as well, but I'm not 100% positive because you're actually sending from a specific user in this scenario. But it should check, but we can absolutely
I
peek
think if
into that
people
one
are
as well.
concerned about that, they could always add it to their query and say
Yes.
just anybody that's marked with do not email, don't put them on the list if it's a list going to be used for email purposes.
Yeah, it gets a little bit tricky because everybody's system is different. So there's some out of the box fields that are for like do not contact, do not send marketing materials that are like an automatic check. But if you have any custom fields that have been created in your system, which a lot of people do, it's not going to automatically check for those fields. Absolutely. So you want to make sure when you're creating your list that you kind of account for your data structure. So what are you collecting? Where is it? If it's a custom field especially, you want to make sure that you add it to your query because it's not going to be accounted for out of the box.
Okay, thanks, Bryn. I think this is a good place to stop before we go look at those activities. But now that you've created the activities, I think the next step will be to look at the activities. But since we have already spent so much time doing this, I say we cut this into 2 parts, and we'll do the second part where we'll look at the activities and we'll come back and look at how to make a full campaign. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Boom, let's do it. See you later.